And let me tell you something. You have the opportunity to do things that you could only dream of. Now, a lot of people, they sit and they wait for the government to do things. They wait for the government to figure out that something is bad and ban it, right? They wait for, some level of authority to come out and tell you what you should or should not do. And I'm here to tell you that you have the power to be that authority. You have the power to make that decision now.
Welcome to Beyond Clean with Ace. In the world of commercial cleaning, newcomers and seasoned professionals know we're more than just toilets, windows, and floors. We're just like everyone else with diverse interests in everything. And over the past 7 seasons, tens of thousands have discovered engaging, thoughtful, and truly game-changing knowledge here. Whether you're a facility manager, a frontline staff member, or a building services contractor, we're here to help you grow both personally and professionally. So hit that subscribe button and share with others, because we're all about enhancing lives in healthy, positive, and proactive ways. Now let's join Dave Thompson, Director of the Academy of Cleaning Excellence, your host here at Beyond Clean with Ace.
Good morning, everyone. This is Dave Thompson, and yes, I'm here with another episode of Beyond Clean with Ace. We talk about everything, well, not just cleaning. It's July. It's hot. If you're in Florida like I am, it's also humid. When you get humidity and heat, it's just terrible. But we love Florida. That's why we're here. Hope you're having a good time where you are this summer. But you know what? I've got somebody that's on the line here with me today. We've talked with him before. Let's get right into it. Michael, you're in Florida too. You're in Florida too. You're having the same problem I've got.
I'm in Florida too. You go outside and you just have beads of sweat that naturally develop on your skin within 30 seconds. It's amazing.
This is where you listen to the air conditioner run more than your car.
Yes. This is where if your air conditioning goes down, it's a severe problem.
Oh, let me talk about that for a minute. Hey, my air conditioner went out on my car on a 4-hour trip.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and then there was an accident, so I sat in 3-mile-an-hour traffic with no air. It's sprinkling, it's raining, can't open up the windows. It was terrible, folks. I got to tell you, air conditioning is good when you're in Florida.
That sounds like a miserable time. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Hey, I got it fixed the next day. I can guarantee you.
If you've never experienced that, once you experience that, you will appreciate it, may even worship air conditioning after that experience, right?
Michael, the thing is how did people ever get along in Florida before air conditioning? I just don't know how. Of course, I'm a transplant from the Midwest, so.
Yeah, just looking back at a lot of the history here in the South, they had these big grand breezeways. They would just open their front door, their back door mirrored their front door, and there was this crazy big hallway. They had staircases that spiraled up this, right off of this hallway, and essentially all that air would kind of breeze up and through the house. Very high ceilings to allow for a lot of air to come through. Obviously different times, and with modern AC, they don't build them like that anymore because we don't need to. We have AC.
It seems like you and I've talked about this before.
Possibly, it's very possible we did.
And that's the whole thing. And folks, if you haven't been on the air with us before and listened to Michael, why don't you give them a little bit of brief history of who you are, what you do, and why do we talk to you every month?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wonder every day why you want to talk to me every month. But my name is Michael Rubino. I'm an indoor air quality expert. My career started after Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast pretty heavily, affected tens of thousands of homes, impacted a lot of people. It was the first time that I really saw a pattern of people getting sick inside their own homes, where it really opened the door for me personally to understand air quality and how that impacts human health. And air quality can mean so many different things, as probably many people thinking about this realize. We could be talking about how cleaning products, chemicals can impact air quality, how things like water damage, which create mold and bacteria, can impact air quality, how painting our houses with high chemical products and that off gas producing what's called VOCs at high levels, that can affect air quality. Bringing things in with formaldehyde into our home can affect air quality, right? So there's all these different things that unfortunately create particles that enter our body with every breath that we take. And I have, spent more than a decade kind of expanding my knowledge base and helping as many people as I possibly can through identifying problems with the quality of air they're breathing and then improving that quality of air. And I think that's why you're having me on. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're learning quite a bit if you listen to some of these episodes.
Well, Michael, I'm going to share your website here for just a moment. So, folks, if you're listening on the podcast, not watching the YouTube, you can't see what we're talking about. So, Michael, explain what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so we're talking about mycotoxins here on this website, and it says, the quote is, mold and mycotoxins are a leading cause of poor indoor air quality, which can lead to health issues. So mycotoxins are very interesting. It is a secondary metabolite produced by certain species of mold. Different mold species produce different mycotoxins. Different mycotoxins have an effect on the human body. Now, mycotoxins, it's a Greek word. It means, myco means of the fungus, and toxin obviously is something that's toxin to humans and animals, right? Mycotoxins can become problematic. The FDA regulates it in our food supply. Just to give people some background, well, at least they try their best to regulate it in our food supply. I should rather say that. Mycotoxins are known to be carcinogenic to humans and animals. They can spoil and contaminate grains and coffee beans and all kinds of things that might be stored in humid places. And so it's something that we're concerned about with respects to food, but it's also something we're concerned about with respects to our homes. And the reason being is because if I have certain species of mold in my home and it's growing rapidly and it's out of control, it may be producing mycotoxins. Now, what makes mold produce mycotoxins? I think a lot more research is needed on all of the ways that mycotoxins are produced. But the theory is that mold, typically in this quest to obtain as much real estate as possible, it's an organism after all. Its purpose is to survive. Right. Different molds are actually producing mycotoxins to try to kill each other to take over that real estate. So you might have like a mold called Stachybotrys, which is usually the toxic black mold you hear about. And then there's another toxic black mold called Chaetomia. And they may be fighting for the same real estate in your walls. And unfortunately, you then are breathing in mycotoxins as an innocent bystander. It's basically like chemical warfare that's happening inside your walls by these microorganisms.
I was going to say that sounds like a battle I don't want to be a part of, but we say innocent bystander, but are we?
Well, innocent bystander in the sense where it could be happening and you have no idea. But, no, you're technically not innocent, because if you're having water damage, you need to be on top of it, because if you're not on top of it, that's when these problems start to happen. Obviously, some problems might not be as obvious, like problems with your HVAC unit, for example, something to that effect. But, it's really up to you to inspect your home. Make sure things like windows and doors aren't leaking, the roof's not leaking. Stopping water from coming in is really key. And, human nature, I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes I wait for the wheel to be broken before I fix the wheel, right? Well, if we can preemptively, fix the wheel when it starts to wear down or starts to become a problem, well, guess what? I'm going to save a lot of money, and so are you. So the goal is we want to get more into this preventative mindset instead of this reactive mindset where we literally wait for water to pour in before we do something about it.
Well, one of my big words, Michael, is being proactive, and that's what I'm all about. But, I have a particular reason why I want to talk about this today, because last year about this time was when I was diagnosed with some of these mycotoxins that were in my body. And I had to go through a regimen of some drugs through the end of the year. And then we started on an 18-month regimen of 3 different drugs to work on some others. Folks, I got to tell you, 8 weeks into that, my body couldn't handle them. I had to get away from them. I couldn't tolerate those. But now, since I can't do that, my infectious doctor and my respiratory therapist say, well, we got to check you every 6 months so that none of these turn cancerous. And I'm just thinking about this, and this is my own personal story, folks, so I just kind of want to relate this. But what kind of brought this up is here in Florida, we're getting ready to go into hurricane season, and we just had that one that went through Texas. And I think that innocent bystander thing might be an interesting topic in being proactive as we go into this season.
Oh, I agree. I mean, hurricane season is upon us, and if you live in the path of where these hurricanes typically hit during this time of year, it's really important that you take the proper steps to prevent catastrophic damage as best as possible. Of course, if you get a Category 5 hurricane ripped through your house, it's pretty hard to prevent that, right? But if you're going to get a tremendous amount of rainfall, it's important that you check your roof. If it's time for a new roof, it's important you don't delay, when hurricane season's approaching, because that's where, you're the most vulnerable. And the amount of rainfall you can get that can overwhelm your roof, especially if it needs to be replaced, that's something you want to, really stay on top of, or you're going to have catastrophic leaks. The other thing is doors and windows. Those are weak points where water can intrude. Why? Because doors are either installed with some silicone, literally just silicone preventing water from coming in, or they have flashing, and that flashing doesn't last forever either. And so what you want to do is you want to inspect those things. You want to inspect the silicone. You want to inspect the flashing, depending on how your windows are installed, to make sure, again, water is not coming in. And these things, if you're not on top of, you are most vulnerable during a hurricane season with the amount of water and wind, and especially wind-driven rains that may be approaching.
Well, and for me, I live in a mobile home, if you will, trailer, and I check all these things and stuff, and I asked my infectious disease doctor. I said, "How did I get this mold-related mycotoxin?" He goes, some of it's just in the air, because I am proactive. I make sure that all these things are sealed. I don't have mold in my trailer, but yet he said some of this is just in the environment, and some of us, because I have a respiratory illness already, I'm just more susceptible to it, and I'm, hey, of that age.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you already have other co-infections or other diseases or other illnesses, you become more susceptible to your environment, right? And so things like mold and the mycotoxins that mold can produce, they might impact you more than the average person, right? And so you'd want to protect yourself a little more. And so for you, Dave, the best recommendation I can make, you're already proactive. You're already switched up all the strategies of how you clean. Not much I can teach you, but I would say if you haven't already, look into upgrading your filtration system in your HVAC unit for that mobile home. Maybe look into getting, an affordable air purifier for yourself that you could plug in, and that's constantly filtering out particles from the air. These are strategies that you can employ that will actually reduce the amount of exposure you're having to mold and these mycotoxins.
Well, and folks, this is why we have a podcast. This is why it's interesting for you to not only listen to it, but to share this with others, because you may know somebody that's in the situation I'm in. And you're right. I've taken all those things. The only thing I don't have currently in my house is the air purifier, because, hey, we've got, ceiling air conditioners. There is no filtration system in these units. Right. So, that is my next step to get. As we're talking, I mean, how many people really are thinking about this kind of stuff? And I know we mentioned hurricanes, but hey, just plain rains. And as you said, wind driven, it's the moisture time. It's the rainy season, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much no matter where you live, you will have a rainy season. I mean, even in the desert, you're going to have, the seasons where it rains more than usual. And, if you look at California, for example, it really never rains there. But when it does rain, because of the lack of infrastructure they have, because it never rains there, it overwhelms them like tremendously. Then you start hearing of landslides, and you start hearing of people's houses that get flooded and all these different things. And so what is this? Lack of preparation, right? When we're not prepared for something, when we have an opportunity where we need to be prepared, we're going to end in catastrophic failure. And that's really what it comes down to. It's that preparation. And so no matter where you live, you want to look at, okay, is it hurricane season? Is it rainy season? Are there any things, is there anything coming up that I, need to be worried about? I mean, even if we all have HVAC systems pretty much in our homes at this point in time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, is summer approaching where I should, get my system cleaned and tuned up? Is winter approaching where I should get my system cleaned and tuned up? Because obviously when you're switching from AC to heat and heat to AC, there are things that happen, and having that system cleaned and filters changed and getting the system tuned to make sure it's working properly. These are things that you can do that are easy to do, that you should be doing, right? That unfortunately, just because life takes over and things happen, we don't always do, right? And so it's just about, really being mindful of these things. And why should you be mindful of these things? Why should you stay on top of these things even when life gets in the way? Well, because we're talking about our health here, right? We're talking about invisible particles that enter our body with every breath that we take, which, by the way, is 20,000 times per day. And if you do those things and you stay on top of those things, you're actually going to notice improvements in your health that you might not otherwise notice. And nobody's telling you that, because everybody's trying to sell you the next diet program, the next supplement, the next little health fad. And they're not telling you the basic fundamentals like, hey, just breathing and the amount of particles you're breathing in matter.
Well, I'm getting ready to conduct an infection prevention class this Friday to a bunch of people. And, one of the things I did not do in the early days, excuse me, with these classes is even though I was aware, it was just something I didn't think about doing, and I now do, is I talk a lot about dust and how dust carries so much stuff. And I know what I talk about, how much stuff is in dust. You have some thoughts about that?
Oh, yeah. I always teach people, dust is public enemy number one when it comes to, keeping a clean home. And the reason being is because you don't just, a lot of people think that dust is just dead hair and skin cells. I'm here to tell you today that it's a lot more than just dead hair and skin cells, right? If we have formaldehyde in our environment, formaldehyde is going to be in our dust. If we have mold in our environment, mold's going to be in our dust. Bacteria is going to be in our dust. The toxins that mold and bacteria can produce will be in our dust. Think about it from this perspective. Anything that can impact your home, including viruses, they're going to essentially aerosolize first, right? Wherever the source is. So if I'm the source of a virus, I'm going to cough it out, or I'm going to just exhale it out. Mm-hmm. It's going to attach to a dust particle that's already in the air. It's going to hitch a ride. It's going to travel a lot further, but eventually it's going to settle where our dust settles. Now, if you've ever walked across your house, if you've ever seen dust settle on a surface, that's what happens, right? It aerosolizes first, it's in the air, then it settles. Now, I could re-aerosolize it, right? I could walk across the room. The sheer force of my body moving across the room kicks up enough air. I could actually push some of that dust that's settled on the floor, on a surface, back into the air. That's called it re-aerosolizes, right? And now, as dust re-aerosolizes, I'm breathing it in. Now, whatever, I just took a breath and I just basically consumed anything that's in that dust, which I already mentioned. Could be mold, bacteria, viruses, you name it. And why is that such a problem? Well, depending on the actual particle that's attached to the dust, it's probably going to bypass self-defense mechanisms that I have, like the lungs, like mucous membranes. Now, according to the American Lung Association, the danger really is that 10 micron threshold. As a matter of fact, they say anything smaller than 10 microns in particle size poses the greatest human health risk. That's because it's so small, it bypasses their self-defense mechanism. So what that means is...
So hang on just a minute, because folks, you got to really hear what Michael's saying here. And I think this is the important thing. I have people that say, oh, you know what, dust is dust. And my body will take care of it. But under 10 microns, that's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of things. And that's the real risk here, is there's a lot of things that accumulate in our dust that have the ability to affect the human body. Now, how does it affect
your body can't deal with that. We weren't engineered, from biological standpoint, our filtration in our body wasn't made to handle that, right?
Right. It's not. It's literally meant to handle anything 10 microns and above. Anything less than 10 microns, it bypasses their self-defense mechanism. So what does it actually mean, bypassing self-defense? That's what I want to explain to you a little bit. What happens is we first inhale it. So then it impacts the respiratory tract at that point, right?
Right.
Any particle smaller than 10 microns, right, then bypasses that respiratory tract. Then it enters our bloodstream. And what does
Right.
that mean? It means that anything that we inhale, if it's small enough, we also ingest. And now it passes through our, our gut and our liver and kidneys, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's affecting our organs, and it has multi-system, depending on the particle and what that particle can accomplish in the human body. We're talking about multi-system issues that happen within the human body. So certain mycotoxins, for example, they can cause neurological effects. They can cause gut issues, right? They can cause skin issues. We start looking at all the different organs in the body, depending on what that toxin is and that individual person's genetics, epigenetics, et cetera. It has the capability of impacting that person. And of course, all those things considered, epigenetics, genetics, their diet, their exercise regimen, like all those things impact the health and the ability for the body to deal with that particular particle or toxin, et cetera. But up to a certain quantity, right? Past a certain quantity, for that person, it overloads their immune system. And now they get sick. And that's really what this happens. I mean, when you think about infectious disease and viruses, well, if I have too much of those virus particles at any given moment, I can't tell you an exact number because everybody's different. But if there's too much virus particles, it overtakes the immune system. And now you are sick with that particular virus. This is how it works. And so we're dealing with microbiology. We want to make sure that what's in our dust is not affecting us. And what's the best way to do that? Well, to control the amount of dust we're breathing in.
Now, as Michael was talking about that, folks, we're in the cleaning industry, if you're listening to this possibly or quite normally. And so this is also the reason why, Michael, I tell people, do not use a trigger sprayer on any chemical. I don't care what it's made of, because that aerosolizes that, and that is below the 10 micron where your body is ingesting it, and that does go to your bloodstream. And so that's why I also talk about in this infection prevention class the pH of the chemicals that we're using. If it isn't safe for the body, you're putting it into your bloodstream. Many people don't know that the pH of your blood is 7.365. If you're using a pH of a product that's a 14, that's not healthy.
Yeah, I mean, the good rule of thumb is if it's not safe to eat, then it's not safe to use. And not that you would really enjoy eating some organic soap or something, but the reality of it is if it's not safe to eat, you shouldn't be putting it on your body. You shouldn't be using it in your environment. You shouldn't be inhaling it, which then turns into ingesting it, right? And so that's really the key kicker that we want to look at. And so if you kind of develop that frame of mind, then when you start buying products, you can really decide, well, is that something that I really want to have in contact with my body? Because most of the time, if I'm using a product in the environment, even if I'm rinsing it, I am subject to inhalation and ingestion to some level, even if I'm wearing a mask. I mean, the thing about masks and filters, same conversation, is it does help you to some extent. Right. But every single product will have a percentage, which means that, let's say it's 95% effective, which would be very high. 5% of the time, you're still inhaling it. You're still ingesting it. It's bypassing the filter system of the mask or the filter itself, right? And so you just want to be aware of that. Yes, you can mitigate. You always want to mitigate. Take every chance you can to mitigate. Ventilation, masks, things of that nature when you're using products, awesome. However, just know, there is never 100% foolproof way. You always will have some level of bypass. And so with that being said, you want to choose the safest thing possible.
Well, and that goes for organic or what people are calling biodegradable, whether it comes from the environment naturally or it's man-made, this still all plays important and is absolutely the same. I have people say, oh, I only use organic material. Well, I got to tell you, vinegar is organic, citrus is organic, and too much of a good thing is still too much of a good thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, people say all the time, hey, but I have a question, on mold. Some molds aren't as toxic. Some might be more benign. How does that impact me? I just tell them, listen, if I put you in if I drop you in the center of a sandstorm, okay, sand is not toxic, right? You go to the beach, you get sand on your toe, it's not toxic. But I put you in the center of a sandstorm and you're breathing in tons of sand. What do you think that's going to do to you? How do you think you're going to feel? Oh, I'm not going to feel well. Right, exactly, right? Because too much of anything becomes toxic at some point. And so when you're dealing with mold, right, whether it's the real bad toxic stuff or more of the benign stuff, if I have too much of it, it doesn't matter how toxic that mold may be. It will be toxic to me in enough quantity. And so too much of anything will kill you, as they say. And that's something that, you want to hear, you want to hold true. I mean, too much water. Water's good. We're made up of a lot of water. We need a lot of water. But what happens if we have too much water? We drown, right? So too much of anything will kill you. That is like a stable thing that you can kind of run with on this planet for sure.
Yeah, you can always rely that too much of anything is still too much. And when we know it's too much well, hopefully we're listening to our body before. But this is the problem with chemistry so much when we use chemistry in cleaning, is it happens so very slowly that we don't know. And the same thing with dust. These things happen so slowly to our system that by the time we, wait for our body to tell us, well, we're not listening to our body is what my doctor says. He says, if you've got runny nose, if you're coughing, if you're sneezing, if you got watery eyes, if you're continually having a headache, your body is trying to tell you something. Listen.
So true. I mean, how many times have we been in the field in some aspect doing something and there's a lot of dust around and we're coughing and we're sneezing, we've got runny nose and we're just kind of powering through it to get the job done, right? How many times have you been in that position? Listening to your body and saying, all right, this is obviously impacting me. Let me make an adjustment here. Let me protect myself here so that I don't get sick. I mean, how often have you just powered through it and then guess what happens the next day? Or maybe it takes a day, maybe it's a day after you wake up sick, right? And it's because now your body's fighting to remove all this stuff that you've been breathing. And so, it's really important that you think about these things proactively instead of reactively, because once you get to that point where you're sick or you've got this illness and it's chronic illness, it's something that's not going to go away. A lot of these things, unfortunately, with modern medicine, they're irreversible. And so the damage is done, and you want to actually be as proactive as you can so you never get to that point.
Well, and you mentioned chronic, and that's what my problem is. Not listening, not knowing. Back in the earlier days, we didn't know about the toxins and the chemicals. And so my chronic asthma, which turned to COPD, is the reason why I'm dealing with the issues today. And I guess this leads me to, if you're a business owner in the cleaning industry and you're listening to this podcast, we're trying to tell you to be proactive because, retention of employees in the cleaning industry, depending on who you're listening to, can be up between 200 to 300%, and for various different reasons, as we've said on other podcasts, folks. But listening to your body, listening to your people and the issues that they're having, I would say would help you in that retention, because if you're proactive and helping them stay safe, that's what most of us want.
100%. In terms of that too, you think about from this perspective, not only do I want them safe and healthy and happy, right? But I want them productive. And if you're a business owner and you want your people safe, happy, healthy, and productive, well, think about how much they can get sick. Think about employees that are getting sick all the time. They're getting sick all the time because something is wrong in their environment. And maybe when they go to work, they're not wearing masks when they should be. Maybe the products that you're having them use might be more toxic when there's safer options out there. Like there's always something that is creating this ability for them to get sick and get sick more frequently. We already talked about this earlier. It's like when you have too much going on in your environment, whether it's chemicals or mold or bacteria or whatever it may be that's impacting the quality of air that you're breathing, your immune system gets impacted to the point where you're now sick a lot more frequently, right? So you want to try to do everything you can in your business practice to help people, keep them safe, keep them healthy. That's going to keep them more productive. It's going to keep them happier. It's going to keep them wanting to stay, because the risk level goes so much further down. Now, if I'm somebody and I'm working for you and I get sick all the time, I'm not healthy, I'm unhappy, I'm going to want to leave, right? And so turnover is probably one of the most expensive things that it can cost any business owner, because now you have to retrain everybody, restart, go through the hiring process. You can't produce as much because you have less labor force. Your clients are upset because you're not completing jobs as quickly as you once were, right? There's a whole ripple effect that happens, and it starts with making sure your people are safe, happy, healthy, and productive.
I'm thinking of two things here, Michael. I know that companies have programs where they're helping with financial things with their employees, advice and meetings and stuff. We have safety meetings and stuff. I've heard a lot of people talking about wellness stuff, but I don't really hear anybody talk about what we're talking about to bring this to their employees. The second thing, as we talk about this, Michael, is, we're in the process in natural of what we do of moving all of the stuff that's there. And when you were talking about moving this in the air and breathing it in, I mean, that's our job. This is who we are, what we do. This all has to go together.
It does. It all has to go together. You look at office buildings, I would say today, as opposed to 20, 30 years ago, developers, they're developing communities, right? They're not just developing these office buildings and pumping as much people through them anymore. They're developing communities where that office building is connected to a bunch of restaurants that they can walk out of their beautiful office building and go in and like have a beer, have a meal, and actually be able to connect with people and connect with their coworkers. And there might be several different office buildings surrounding this, almost like this little town for them, right? Yep. And they've got doctors on site, and they've got this and that, and it's like there's yoga classes that happen before work starts, and like there's all these things that are centralized around building a healthy community. And I think that's the way of the future, right? And to be honest, like the old office way, people aren't looking for that anymore. How hard is it to get people to work in an office building? You constantly see on the news all the time. It's the most difficult thing because it's these stuffy places. They don't have great air quality. They're built many, many years ago, so they weren't built with air quality in mind. We're just starting to really do that today. And so a lot of these things, they affect mood. How many of them are dark and dreary, and they're just stuffed in cubicles and you get no natural light. Well, that affects people's moods too, right? And so I think the old way of doing things is kind of changing, and having this new approach where we care more about people's health and well-being. I think we're moving in a much better direction. We're seeing people happier and healthier. They're obviously, their moods have changed, their productivity has changed, and things are going up and up. And I think it's because the way in which we're thinking about our people and our communities, we're kind of making them one and the same, which is really a special thing.
Have you ever started doing any of the consulting with businesses when we talk about indoor health and stuff to not just the buildings that they work with, but also their employees in their homes? Kind of like the tax advisor and the financial advisor kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do a ton of consulting work. Recently, I just kind of outfitted this NFL gym in Tampa, Florida. We looked at their space. We improved the quality of air they're breathing. We put in these amazing commercialized units that are going to help kind of, actually these units specifically, they go down to 7 nanometers in particle size. So we're talking about like, we're capturing a large percentage of viruses. That's how small from that space. So, this is where like athletes come and work out from the NFL and NBA and MLB, and they come and they work out and they train hard, and usually during the off season. And very vital that when you're working out, you're breathing obviously a lot more. You're taking a lot deeper breaths, right? Very vital. The quality of air they're breathing is paramount. And so,
your ingestion and your intake when you're doing that in a workout is, just astronomical compared to, just our day to day.
Oh, absolutely. And so we were able to consult with them on creating this amazing program. And then we have literature that every single, athlete receives, with information about the dust test, how they can use PCR technology, test their dust, see what's in their dust, and get a good sense on their own homes as well, right? Because it starts with you becoming aware of it. And then once you're aware of it, you can obviously do something about it, right? And make improvements. And just like anything else, right? You're always going to have some level of something in your dust. So depends on how you look at it from a mentality perspective. The way I look at it is I always have room for improvement. So I can take a dust test. I can look at what's in my dust. I can figure out what the sources might be or what the problems might be that are creating these abnormal amount of particles in my dust, right? There's always a source somewhere creating those particles, then settling in the dust. And then I can make improvements and then retest my dust, a few months later and see how things have improved, right? And so we're teaching people how to do that and how to use this information to empower them to breathe better quality air. And you know what they're saying? They're saying things like, honestly, ever since I've, put an air purifier in my bedroom, I sleep better. Ever since I've made these tweaks, I have more energy. It's like the most subtle things you would have never thought that have been affecting even the healthiest people, as they thought they were just so healthy. And they would have never guessed that these small little changes would have had yielded such big results. And so I love what I do in that realm, because the possibilities are endless. Where we're at in terms of the science and the medical information, outside of like aspergillosis, which we all know is this deadly fungal infection that we can get. We don't know much about how all the different ways that air quality and mold affect us, right? Outside of the research we just saw come out of Cancer UK, which was advertised on BBC, 1 in 10 cancer cases they now believe is due to air pollution, right? And so we're starting to learn more and more things, but this is like the infancy of where we're at. Like we are just scratching the surface. We are just learning all the different ways this impacts people's health. Now I have tremendous amount of theories on the subject, but to remind people just how long it takes, it took 50 years, 50, before medical doctors that were once telling you, this is the brand of cigarettes that I smoke. It took them 50 years to get to the end of the line and say, you know what, cigarettes are bad, don't smoke them, okay? They went from promoting cigarette brands to 50 years later, oh, cigarettes, yeah, we realized not so good, right? When you think about it from that perspective, it takes a long time for information to get across, to get studied, to get learned, to get tested, to then become something that they're willing to tell you, the public. So,
Michael, that is the problem with our world. We are procrastinators. We don't want to change anything. And, I think that's, unfortunately, folks, I got to say this because I've heard this said many times, and I think you'll agree. This is the one thing that COVID did to us, is it made a lot of people change. And it's unfortunate that something like that has to happen. But as I say that, I think there is a tremendous amount of the general public that has just slipped back into their old ways. The out of sight, out of mind, and what you're talking about, what we talk about on this podcast with you. And the reason that I ask you to come back every month is because we have to keep this in the front of mind. And if you've heard this podcast before, folks, you've heard us say most of everything we just said today before, and we will keep saying it again and again, because I'm not going to be here for another 50 years.
I want to say something really important to you before you go today, and that is that you are special, right? You have a purpose. Whatever it is that you are looking to accomplish, maybe you have figured out your purpose yet, maybe you haven't, but you are here, you are special, you have a purpose. And let me tell you something. You have the opportunity to do things that you could only dream of. Now, a lot of people, they sit and they wait for the government to do things. They wait for the government to figure out that something is bad and ban it, right? They wait for, some level of authority to come out and tell you what you should or should not do. And I'm here to tell you that you have the power to be that authority. You have the power to make that decision now, right? And what does that look like? It looks like I'm going to actually, I'm not going to wait for a chemical to be banned. I'm going to ban it myself in my own practice. And why would I do that? Because that chemical might harm other people. And I know it. And if I know it, I should be responsible to do something about it. Now, we can look at that and we can actually have that transcend all different areas of life. But I want you to know that you are special and that you could do something about this. As a matter of fact, as a business owner, there's an amazing book I read. It's called The Healing Organization. And that book taught me that I don't have to wait for anybody to do good in the world. I can just go out and do good in the world. And I don't need a license or some sort of certification to do good in the world. I could just decide that I'm going to do good in the world. And I pass that same message to you, because I think, it's really up to people like us that to learn information, to study information, and to pass on that information so that other people can benefit from it. And so you now have that authority just as much as I do.
And people ask me, why do you do what you do? And you hit it right there. Because I can, and I know, and I will. And, at this point, after everything, I think it's probably the best thing to be doing. I should have been doing it a long time ago, but we need more people to do it. Folks, if you've been listening to the podcast, we appreciate it. We'll have all of the connection information for Michael and the notes. If you've been watching the YouTube of the podcast, you've seen his address right here on the screen. Please get hold of Michael. I think the last time we talked to you, if I remember before we leave, there was a movie or something that you're working on that's getting ready to come out.
The documentary, yes. And I'm still working on it, hoping to have some trailer coming up soon. And so I'm imagining the next time we talk, I will be able to give you a website where you can watch the trailer and learn more about this documentary. But it's very exciting, and it's about air quality and air quality's importance on our civilization, specifically you and your family. And so I can't wait for you to see it.
Folks, we thank you a lot for watching our podcast or listening to it, whichever you're doing today. It's not any good if you don't share it. So please subscribe and share, because that is how good information is passed on. Be proactive out there, folks. That's our message today. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. Until next time.